I'm an alcoholic and my name is Gerri.
Hi, Gerri.
And I'm a member of the Courage to Change group. We meet on Tuesday nights from 7:30, and I can't remember the name of the church. Isn't that awful? But we're the only meeting in Charlton on Tuesday nights, and it's the only Courage to Change group. So if you're in Charlton, come on down and see us. Over, west, whatever. I'm not only an alcoholic, I'm geographically challenged, so use your GPS. It's the best I can say. So I haven't stood at a podium in a long time. My home group's in a discussion group, so I haven't stood up at a podium in a long time. And I've asked the God of my understanding, my Creator, to guide my words and heart. So if you don't like what I'm saying, you can take it up with he, she, it after the meeting. So we'll get logistics out of the way. I had what I hope and pray with everything I am. I had my last drink on February 1st, 1988. I was almost 28 years old, and something happened. And that's the best I can say. That's the best I can describe the day that I had my last drink. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. And for me, I can say, I think the elevator gets off on all floors, right? And there are many, many bottoms. And I'm not saying there aren't any more bottoms out there for me, because there certainly are. But the bottom that I hit was the only one that would have brought me to my knees at that time. And I never put value in things that you could get another one of, that you could replace. So if I would have lost a job or lost a relationship or lost a car or lost a house, I wouldn't have cared. It wouldn't have, anything that you could replace didn't have a lot of value to me. And people fell in that category as well. So, and I got in trouble. There was always trouble. I mean, every time I drank. I hear people say that. I didn't get in trouble every time I drank, but every time I was in trouble, I was drinking. No, I got in trouble at the end of the night every time I drank, 100% of the time, in the end of my drinking. I was hilarious and the belle of the ball for about 15 minutes. And it didn't last too much longer than that. And, I was a barroom gal. I liked being in clubs. I liked getting all dressed up and going out. And I liked being in the middle of all the hoopla. I liked the smell. I liked everything about it, until something would click and change, and it would happen every time. I don't like the way you're looking at me. And, I had people in my life that would go. I had a couple of women that, they came into AA with me for a little bit too. They didn't stay, but they came in, and they knew me well enough that they would see that click in my eyes and go, uh-oh, look at me, look at me. I had two in particular. Look in my eyes, don't look anywhere else. Come on, Gerri, we're gonna go, because, I wasn't afraid of anything. I cared about nothing, and so I had two drinking careers. I drank really young, because that's what you did in the 60s and 70s. Everybody did. I wasn't much different than everybody else. And except for that, I was way younger than them, but I always looked a lot older than I was. So I was probably 11 and 12 years old, hanging out with 15 and 16-year-olds, which is a big deal. That's a big age difference in that period of time. And but I didn't have a personality change. That's the piece that's important for me. I had no personality change, but from the very first time I drank alcohol, I got drunk. And the very last time I drank alcohol, I got drunk. And I never drank alcohol for any other reason ever. I never tried to be a social drinker. I never heard of that term until I came into the program. Nobody ever said that where I was hanging out. And, I thought the purpose of having a drink was to get drunk. And if there wasn't enough alcohol to do that, then I didn't drink. I remember being at people's houses. I remember being at this one girl's house one time. There were 4 of us sitting there, and she had a 6-pack of Bud. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's not enough for me. Like, and you want me to share that with 300 people at the table? Like, I haunted her until she drove me and dropped me off at the bar. I liked being in bars because they didn't have six-packs and they didn't run out of booze. That's why I liked being in there. I was really sure they weren't going to run out. And I was a bartender, so I could always get it after hours, go in the back door, fill my my big pocketbook. We used to call it my Felix the Cat bag. You know, I was really good at stealing drinks, too. We'd go out sometimes, and I remember being in the car one time and saying to my friend Donna and Arlene, do you want sex on the beach? Do you want an absolute white Russian? Like, I had full drinks in my pocketbook with the straws in them and everything that I had taken out of the bar. You know, and it was always like fun. I can't say I didn't have any fun, because I did have a lot. We had a lot of laughs, but halfway through the night, it was always going to change. And I'd get angry and violent, and I was afraid of nobody. I didn't care about anything. That's what happened. And that was in the end of my drinking. So that first drinking career, I had a spiritual experience when I was 18 years old. Profound. And I stopped drinking. Like that. I didn't drink. I never had another cigarette. I stopped saying bad words. So 3 miracles took place all at once. And I lived a very spiritual life for 4.5 years. I'm not going to go through the whole thing of, I got married when I was a senior in high school because I thought it was a good idea. I wasn't pregnant. I just thought it was a good idea. And by the time the next summer came around, I didn't like him anymore. And we needed to break up. I needed to break up with him, only we had gotten married. And I got pregnant after we were married for about 4 months for my daughter. And then the very next guy I went on a date with became my second husband. So, you know, when people in meetings will say alcoholics go on their first date with a U-Haul, I have a wedding dress too, a U-Haul and a wedding dress. And so those were my 2 guy experiences. I married both of them, and I ended up having a son. But the second marriage was hell. And I was married to, he was a drug addict, hardcore, used to shoot up. And I didn't know it for a long time because I had never been in that realm, so I didn't recognize the symptoms of it, because he would disappear. He wouldn't do it in front of me. Somebody actually had to tell me what was going on. And then my life became hell. But in that time, I still lived that spiritual life. And after 4.5 years, somebody said just the right words, and it doesn't matter who or why or what they said, but trying to get me to go out with them to a bar, and I said, okay. And it's a bank now, but there was a club called the Library on Route 7, and that's where we went. PF and the Flyers with a band playing. They were singing Bob Seger's Turn the Page. I can remember it like it was yesterday. And I went up to the bar and ordered an Absolute Russian, like I had had one the day before. And, you know, by the end of the night, I knocked the speakers over. I mean, I remember I fell and got up and started dancing. Everybody was yelling. The guys in the band were like, yeah! And it never got any better than that. It never got any better than that. And at this point, that was a relapse to me. And at that point, all the things that were true in my first drinking career were no longer true, and they all changed in that first night, that very first night. I didn't lie, steal. I would never cheat on anybody. I would never, that first drinking career, I was never violent. If you talk to people, they would say I was a really nice person. She just gets wicked drunk. All of that was gone on that very first night in the library on Route 7 in Smithfield. And it just became a downward spiral of I cared less and less, and I started to count on alcohol to take all my feelings away. So Monday through Thursday, I would do everything I had to do so that I could drink, starting usually Thursday night. And, you know, when I came in, and it took a couple of trips through the steps, I was a binge drinker. Alcohol didn't make all my decisions. Yeah, it did, because I did the laundry on Tuesday so that I could drink on Thursday. Like, everything I did revolved around being able to get out of the house. But it took me a couple trips through the steps to really recognize that. And so that last night I drank, and I always got in trouble. I got in fights. I hit people a lot, usually guys. And nothing happened that night. I went home. It was my own house. The sun was come up. Birds are chirping. Same night, thing that always happened. I had a pocketbook full of Budweiser and half a pack of Newports and probably 35 cents because that's what I usually came home with. Didn't matter what I left with. I always came home with the same thing. And, I got this feeling of I did it again. Only this time something was different. And I don't know what that was. I wish I did, because if I could bottle that up, if I could put that in a magic formula or even in a sentence form to tell you what happened to me internally, then every woman in the last 34 years that asked me for help would be sitting in this room right now. But it's not the case. I don't know what happened. Something was different. And I ended up getting 12 stabbed by somebody that had removed me from their life a few months before that. She was my drinking buddy. It was exactly 3 months before this day. She had gotten sober and we were together every day, and she stopped talking to me. And I had told her off 3 months before this day, February 1st. And, I was like, if you can only be my friend if I'm just like you, then screw you. I was never really your friend to begin with. The whole friendship was a lie, and I let her have it, and who are you to judge me? And she picked that morning to call me. She called me at 20:09 that morning. My phone rang, it was her. She's like, Gerri, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you today. You've been on my mind since I got up this morning, and those words you said to me keep ringing in my head, and you're right. I don't have any right to judge you. I miss you, and I love you. I can't be around you when you're drinking, but maybe we could have breakfast or something sometime. And I don't know, it was foggy. I must have had the ability to tell her what was happening to me. And I remember her saying, this can be the last time you ever feel like this. This can be it. You never, ever, ever have to feel like this again. Will you go to a meeting with me? And I thought meetings were stupid. I didn't understand that. I had never been to one, and I actually had never really heard of AA till I kind of got brought to it. We do a much better job today. There's much more public information out there, but I had really never heard of it. And so I took the yellow pages out, found a place where I could go to counseling, made a counseling appointment. That guy kept suggesting I go to meetings. And I remember being so rude because I had to go there to fill out forms to come to counseling. And I saw this guy sitting in an office, and he had red hair, and my ex-husband had red hair, and I made a really rude, I'm not going to say it from the podium, but I made a really rude comment about that better not be my counselor. And sure enough, that was my counselor. And he heard me. I didn't care if he heard me, but he did hear me, and we talked about that and kind of laughed on my first appointment. But I went to, my first AA meeting was the Another Way group that used to meet on Bryant College. They've been disbanded for a long, long time, but it was an amazing group. And there was magic in that room. It was a huge meeting. It was a pickup meeting that night because the commitment hadn't shown up, and there was a guy at the podium, and I don't remember anything else he said. The one thing I remembered he said was, my problem is this big. And he could have sat down after that because I knew exactly what he was talking about. I always knew that. If I take one sip, all bets are off. Everything changes. And I don't care what I'm supposed to do. If I'm supposed to be in your wedding, if I'm supposed to carry your coffin in your funeral, if I'm supposed to pick up my kids at school, if I'm supposed to go to work, I can't do it. I can't. And there isn't a love or a desire on the face of the planet that can change that once I pick up a drink. Nothing can change that the second it's ingested. And when he said that from the podium, I knew that's what he meant. I knew it. That man today is my father-in-law. He wasn't at the time. And I know he said a lot of other things because he used to be a podium pounder. His voice, he's old now. His voice got quieter, so we can't really do that anymore. But, I just slowly came to AA, and that's what happened. I just kept showing up. Back then you used to hear a lot of things like, don't drink and go to meetings and everything else will take care of itself. And that isn't enough to sustain a sober, useful life, but it's enough in the beginning. I couldn't grasp more than that. Don't drink and go to meetings and everything else will take care of itself. Keep coming. And that's what I did. I used to go to, because I was a bartender, I'd go to Olo Street in Woonsocket Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Tuesday night I went to another way group, and Friday there was a Asbill season meeting that I went to. And the people in AA scooped me in. They made this place attractive. They were walking, living examples of the big book in action. Not in words, in action. You know, they would talk. They didn't, you know, when I talk about my early sobriety, they didn't care too much about my feelings and whether they were hurt or not. But they sure cared whether or not I made it through the day without picking up a drink. Nobody called me stupid and told me to shut up, but they held up mirrors so I could see how stupid I was and how badly I really needed to shut up. That's what they did. You know how to get drunk. What do you know about staying sober? That would shut me right up. Nothing? Why don't you sit down and listen to some people who have managed to do that a day at a time for day after day, year after year. And that's what I did. I mean, there was a biker dude. Ollie was a retired police officer. Ollie loved me sober. Doc loved me sober. Rachel told me the truth. She used to call herself the old broad. And a grateful heart will never drink. That should be on her headstone. It really should, because she said that every time she spoke. I used to get so mad because she would say to me, I would share in the meeting, and all the meetings were an hour and a half back then, and I'd share, and she'd go, sounds like you need to write a gratitude list. And I used to want to, and I remember one time in particular, my ex-husband was not happy when I left him, and it was like declaring war, so we got real ugly and did a bunch of really horrible things, and I was complaining, like venting, which is a good thing. Do it if you need to. Throw up all over the table if it helps you to not pick up, and that's what I did. And she pulled me aside and goes, sounds like you need to write a gratitude list. And I was like, why do I have to write it? I'm not the butthole, he is. She said, because you're the one who make it through another day without a drink. And the first thing on that list better be that you didn't have to drink today. That woman taught me that being a sober woman was not an entitlement. It's an honor and a privilege. And with every privilege comes responsibility. I am responsible to carry the message that those people handed to me. In that little room on Olo Street, all those retired people, they were old people to me back then, but some of them were younger than I am right now at the time, who had nothing better to do than focus on whether or not I picked up. And it was unsolicited advice. I didn't ask them. I didn't ask any one of them for their opinion, yet they didn't have any trouble pulling me aside and giving it to me. And it was I heard there was a speaker, Scott Redmond. I love listening to him because he has a really great sense of humor. Scott's in the big meeting in the sky now, but I love listening to his tapes because he's a smarty pants, and I'm Scottish, and we're all smart arses, so I like that. But I'm going to steal his line. He said, I was given the scalpel of truth with the anesthetic of love. And that was my experience. People weren't being mean or abusive. They were telling me the truth. They cared. They didn't go, you're going to drink and walk away. They sat down with me and helped me get through those things, helped me to understand how my perspective of myself and the world at large was off. Even if it's just by this, my husband loves to say this, even if it's just by this much, if you walk a mile and you're this far off, it's not a big deal, but go 2,000 and see what happens if you're off by 1 degree. So we're off, The problem rests solely in our mind. Our thinking and our view of the world at large is off. And, I didn't think I was self-centered. It was really hard to understand that. I was the worst of the worst. I don't need anybody. That was my mantra. I was really rude in the beginning of AA, and people really tolerated me. I mean, I used to rock in my chair and flip off the room. Leave me alone. I was willing to go to any lengths to make you uncomfortable enough to leave me alone. And it worked. Except for those few old crotchety people on Old Street, Woonsocket, that they really didn't care how tough I thought I was. And they touched my heart and my life and they changed the course of my life. They absolutely changed the course of my life. And so did that home group. The Another Way group was a young people's kind of group, and it was a big, they had, like, our group was so big that we had to have our business meetings on separate days, because 50, 55 people would come to the business meeting, and everyone needed to be heard. That used to irritate me, Mars, no? Do we have to beat a dead horse? Like, let's all move on with our lives. But I came to see, and we had little members in there. I goof on them now, because those people are still in my life. Even though the group's not there, we've had lifelong friendships. And my friend Kurt and my friend Diane and Al, my husband, had little pocket versions of the traditions, and I used to say they whip it out like a 6-shooter. Somebody would make a suggestion and say, well, we're going to do this, and it would be like you'd hear, and everybody would whip out their little tradition book and raise their hand about why we couldn't do that. So they carried them around like 6-shooters, you know. But I learned about the traditions. I learned about service. That group had a representative on every committee at the area. There was a corrections person. There was an alternate. There was a PCP person. There was an alternate. There was a PI person. There was an alternate. We had 2 people from the Another Way group on every committee in the area. And what happened to me, and I know it happened to a lot of people, is my sponsor would have one of those positions and say, come on, you be the alternate. We'll go together every month. It'll be great. And then, I can't do this anymore. You're going to have to take the position. So I served on all of those committees, except for public information. That's the only one I never did. And, I got to see, I don't know, I was having this really interesting conversation with somebody today. I live my life outside of AA in a spiritual realm. And I have a spiritual practice in my life. And I was talking to somebody in a place that I work, and we were having a really cool conversation, me and this guy today. But, I was saying to him, and I learned this in AA, if you want to find God, you stick your hand out to somebody else. That's where God exists, at the end of my hand like this, trying to help somebody else. You will not find God any more profoundly than you will at an extended hand to help somebody else. Now in here, we help the next drunk, right? And that's the primary purpose. But our 12-step talks about practicing these principles in all our affairs. It doesn't just mean to other drunks. That doesn't just mean an AA meeting. It means how you treat people in your life and in the world at large. Everyone. The people on the highway. I used to have road rage. I was very impatient. You probably can't picture it because I'm so soft and gentle right now, but I didn't have a lot of patience. That one was a lot of work. And we have a daughter that got in a car accident at 19 years old, a really serious car accident, alcohol-involved car accident. Her head hit a telephone pole, went through the passenger window and hit a telephone pole at like 50 miles an hour. She had a major head injury. It was a mess. And I had to call my mother-in-law. I didn't even know where my husband was working. Like in those days, I never thought to ask where the job site was. I do now, but I never thought of it. He was going to work. I didn't think of it. So my mother-in-law ended up getting everybody together, and they found him. He was working on the Navy base in Groton, Connecticut. He got from Groton, Connecticut, picked up the job, got in the car, and was pulling into Rhode Island Hospital at the same time as me, coming from Pasco. My brother-in-law got out of the car and said, I want hazard pay for today. He buried the speedometer. And so, it was the worst day of my life. And I'm not going to go through all of that, but it was probably one of the worst days of my life. No parent ever wants to get that call. So after that, if I was on the road or I'm losing it, right, because some idiot is in the high-speed lane, the passing lane going 45 in a 65 mile an hour. They love to do that in Massachusetts. That's where I live now. And I'm losing it. I need a paintball gun. My husband used to say to me, maybe he's racing to Rhode Island Hospital because he just got that call. And it would take my breath. So that's how I was able to get over my road rage. I don't swear and yell. I just send a prayer. When I see somebody do that, that's what I mean by the perspective being off, right? Changing the course of my life. I now say a prayer for that person for whatever's happening in their life, that they have to take that kind of a risk on a road or whatever. I needed people in here to show me that. And it's not because I wasn't taught right or wrong from my mother. I had an amazing mother. She was a wonderful human being who she was flawed and did the wrong things and did the right things, but it was always, my mother had my back no matter what, even if she didn't agree with me. Even if she was mad at me, my mother had my back. I come from a line of honorable women, and they were strong as hell. They did not mess around, and that's in my DNA. And then I came into AA, and I got sobered up by people like that too. You know, they got in my face and told me when I was full of it. They got in my face and told me when my behavior was unacceptable. They didn't scream it across the room in front of everybody. Can I talk to you for a minute? I used to get this a lot. Can I talk to you for a minute? Oh, what do I do now? And I was loved sober. You know, I don't know what we get through this phase. We go through these phases. I've been around long enough to see phases in AA and see changes happen. And some of them are great, some of them not so much. We got in this phase where we don't really tell people the truth anymore, and I don't know where that came about, but it's not okay, you know. Well, my friend Mickey, I was able to support my friend Mickey. He was one of those guys that was here when I came in, and he was the first guy I sat through hospice care with, and I was with him when he took his last breath. And you know, one time when I was taking him to radiation, he yelled at me because I don't know how he always knew what happened in the meeting, the Tuesday night meeting that you guys belong to now, but he always knew what went on in there. And he yelled at me because somebody talked for 45 minutes and I didn't interrupt him. And I'm like, wow, I don't even know what my reason was. I was just driving the car, and he said, you know, Gerri, we're killing people in AA with kindness. And the key to that sentence is that we're killing them. We're so concerned with people's feelings that we're forgetting to stay focused on whether or not they pick up a drink. And we stop telling them the truth. And don't you ever let me hear of you doing that again. Okay, Nick. But that stuck with me. And, you know, I was taught by example as well as conversation that everyone has a right to be here. And if you're sitting in this room and you need help to not pick up a drink, I'll do anything I can to help you, even if I don't like you. You know, I come from Burrable, it's a small town, and there were quite a few people there I didn't care too much for. As hard as that might be to believe. But I would do it. That's what practicing these principles in all our affairs means. You know, that spirit of anonymity has another side to that coin. It doesn't matter who you are. That's the spiritual principle of anonymity. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from or what you did. If you want to stay away from a drink, it is my responsibility to put my hand out and help you do that. Whether I like you or not doesn't matter. Because if I'm bleeding to death and trying with everything I have not to pick up, I hope you'll do the same for me, whether you like me or not. There are a couple people that don't really like me. So I feel really rich. I mean, I feel like, especially in the beginning of my recovery, I walked among giants. I was just awestruck by the grace and integrity and honor that I saw in men and women from all different walks of life. I mean, the guy that helped me reconnect with my Creator was a Hell's Angel. Somebody I would have never spoken to outside of the halls of AA. Yet, you know, I remember I was like a year and a half sober, and I was really struggling, and I was trying to return to that experience I had had, and nothing was happening. I wasn't feeling it. And it was a simple little statement, but it was really profound to me at the time. And he said, Gerri, everything you know about God gets you drunk. I think you better forget everything you know and start off with, there is a God, I am not it, that God will keep me sober. And anything else from your past before this moment that you know about God, erase it until you have a blank canvas that only says, there is a God, I am not it, that God will keep me sober. And when you get to that point with that blank canvas and that title over the top, then you should start experiencing God. And you do that through going through the steps of recovery, which I did. And I started to have experiences. He didn't say it like pretty and cute like I just did. I mean, one day he had me outside and he was like, you feel that wind on your face? Because he was really gruff, right? That's the God I embrace every day. I'm saying it nice. That's not how he said it, but I got the message. I'm a bottom line kind of gal. I don't like subtlety. Like, what's the bottom line? And I got the bottom line. Do you want to live or you want to die? Because that's really what it's about. Active alcoholism is covert suicide. If nobody's told you that, that's what it is. You have a little teeny tiny gun with little tiny bullets, and you're going like this every time you pick up a drink. And eventually it's going to kill you. It's covert suicide. So do you want to live or do you want to die? And boy, if I came this close to missing everything. I live well. I've been married to the same guy for 31 years, and I still like him. I don't want to break up with him. We enjoy each other's company. As each year goes by, we get closer and closer. We've raised my children. My daughter's 44, going to be 44. I can't believe it. And my son just turned 41, and they have families, and they're good people. They're good people. They're not perfect. They don't do everything I think they should do the way I think they should do it, but they're good people. My daughter and I talk. She calls me every morning at 8:10 a.m. It's right on the nose every day. When something's going on, she calls me and seeks my advice. I talk to her at least once a day. It's usually more than that. We moved to Sturbridge, Mass, and it was really hard to start a new, because, how sober was I? I don't know. It doesn't matter. We've been there almost 8 years, and the first few I just kept going to Rhode Island meetings because in Sturbridge was horrible. I didn't like it. But we made a decision that we need to support AA in our own community, and that's where we live, and that's what I started doing. And now I have people in my life and sponsees, and I have a sponsor there, and it's good. But what else do I want to tell you? So I did a lot of service. My husband did much more structured service than I did because I held the fort down so he could. After he served as delegate and then chair of the convention, somebody asked me you going to now get active? I'm like, I just gave 18 years. Who do you think was doing everything when he was out every night at meetings? I gave 18 years to service too. So, and it's somebody else's turn, but boy, did that help me to be patient and tolerant and to learn that. He was a good example of that. He was much better at that than me, of staying focused on what is our primary purpose and why we're sitting here. For me, I get more caught up in, all right, let's talk about what's really going on here. I don't care about the balloons. Let's talk about your control issue. Why do you feel out of control? I want to talk about the underlying issue, right? And that doesn't bode well in committee meetings, but so I stopped at district, but I got to go to New York when he did. I stayed for a week with him, and I did all kinds of things, and I got to meet people and just really see the broader horizon. And I've gone to meetings in Ireland and all over this country, and the Irish love us. I love Ireland because it's one of the countries that still loves us. And they think, I don't know if they thought I was a direct descendant to Bill W., but every meeting they would go, and I'd like to thank the Americans. I'm like, I didn't write the book. But, where else can that happen? I can walk in an NAA meeting anywhere and feel like I'm connected and at home. I've never experienced that anywhere. Well, I shouldn't say that because in the medicine world that I travel in, we have that same thing. But we're meant to be social, and we seek our own kind. And I've been given a tribe in here. I have people that have stood on the side of me and borne witness to my life. They carry my history, they carry my archives, and it's hard to watch fewer and fewer being in front of me. That's been really, the last 2 years have been huge for that. All my family's gone. I took care of almost every one of them died in my house with me holding their hand as they went. And we did that for 7 years straight. There was somebody in our house that was dying. And, again, I came that close to missing it. I have amazing grandchildren that I'm bonded and, I'm a big part of their lives. I came that close to missing it. The course of my life has been redirected in spite of me. And now it stays on course because of me, because I participate in that. I have not suffered from untreated alcoholism in probably, I don't know, I'm 34 years sober, so it probably took me 6 years for the worst of it to go. And I haven't suffered from untreated alcoholism since. I experienced the joy of living, all the things. I used to make throw up noises in the back of the room out loud, really loud, and people go, "You can have a life beyond your wildest dream." And I'd go, because it was so kooky and corny. And today I saw God's canvas in the sky. I used to listen to all of that stuff and want to throw up. And today I can say that I live that stuff, right? I don't want to be anybody else, and I haven't wanted to be anybody else for a long time. It used to be, if I lived there, if I looked like that, if I was married to him, if I worked there, if that was my mother, if that was my yard, if that was my car, everything would be okay, right? I haven't lived like that in a long time. And how am I doing? All right. So, I like to share this because my husband always does, and I think it's important. I'm working with someone right now that I sponsored her for 6 years in Sturbridge. She stayed sober. She's been coming around for 20, never had 6 years before. And she picked up, and she's been struggling. She's got 2 months now, but she's been struggling for the last year. And, I had to sit her down. She didn't like it, but she sat through it. She didn't run out of my house and say, "What you were doing is not okay. It's okay that you're sitting here right now picking up a drink, but it's not okay that you did." I've been watching with her. She coming into meetings and, crying, and I don't want to yell at my kids, but I screamed at them and talked, and everybody goes, "Oh, it's okay," and they rub her back, and I'm not doing that. It's not okay. You are having a direct effect on those 3 little human beings that live in your house, and you have a responsibility to them as their mother. And if you can't stop picking up for yourself, you do it for them because you owe them that. You owe them that. And recovery, you can't get sober by osmosis, right? But recovery is contagious. Scott Redmond used to say that too. Stay here until you catch alcoholism. Right? Recovery is contagious. It's attractive. Those people made it attractive. Nobody waited for me to put my hand out. They scooped me in. I don't know where that thinking comes from that you have to ask for help to get it. That's not literature-based. Bill W. did not wait for Dr. Bob to ask for help. You're supposed to reach out. And I try to do that because that's what was done to me. People reached out and pulled me in and made this place attractive. They showed me a different way that it was possible for me to live a different way, to have a different life, and I sure do. And there's nothing missing in my life and hasn't been for a long time. So I'm going to tell you that I think, I'm going to try to get the numbers right, I'm not good at this, but I believe it was 40 years ago. Well, yeah, it would be 41 years ago. My father-in-law walked through the halls of Alcoholics Anonymous. He heard a message of hope and recovery, and he hasn't had a drink since. So that would be 38 years ago. My brother-in-law, Jeff, walked into the halls of Alcoholics Anonymous, heard a message of hope and recovery, and he hasn't had a drink since. 35 years ago, my husband walked through the halls of Alcoholics Anonymous. He heard that same exact message of hope and recovery, and he hasn't had a drink since. 34 years ago, something happened in my little kitchen table. I was taken to AA. I heard a message of hope and recovery, and I have not had a drink since. My brother-in-law, Rob, a month less than me, a month after me, 34 years ago, got taken by his brothers and his father to Alcoholics Anonymous. He heard that same message of hope and recovery, was shown how to change his perspective and change the course of his life, and he has not had a drink since. My brother-in-law, Terry, 22 years ago, we didn't even know he had a problem. He was taken to AA by the family, scooped him, because there's a lot of us now. He heard that same exact message of hope and recovery, and he has not had a drink since. 20 years ago, my sister called us for help. She was in a big mess. We brought her to Alcoholics Anonymous and the Ocean State Young People's Conference, and she heard that same message of hope and recovery that all the rest of us heard, exactly the same. She hasn't had a drink since. 16 years ago, that kid of mine, the one who kissed a telephone pole, she didn't get sober by that either, by the way. She drank for 9 more years. Every night of my life, I went to bed wondering if this was the night that alcoholism was going to take my daughter away from me. Is this the night that alcoholism gets my daughter? And she heard that same message of hope and recovery. She called me for help. I had to let go. It was awful. She had come around a couple times, and I did all the wrong things. Dragged her to meetings, thrown her in the car, sat with her, prodded her, and none of it worked. She kept relapsing. So I got a phone call, because I know the cops. I got a phone call that she had gotten a DUI, and I was prepared, and I made some phone calls, and I waited for her to call me. And when she did, I said to her, listen, I'm your mother, and I love you, and I'm always going to be your mother. But I don't have a switch that I can shut that off. I say things to you that I wouldn't say to any other woman that was trying to come around to AA. And so I will be your mother and your support, but I cannot be your connection to Alcoholics Anonymous. You have phone numbers, and you're going to need to use them. And she's been sober ever since. 16 years, that was 16 years ago. 8 years ago, my son, on my actual sober anniversary, we share an anniversary, I got a call from my daughter-in-law that she was done. And I didn't know the stuff had been going on that was going on. And I went and picked my son up on my anniversary and took him to a meeting where he heard a message of hope and recovery. That was the same exact message that my father-in-law heard 41 years ago. And he has not had a drink since. So I'm very protective of Alcoholics Anonymous. You mess with AA, you're messing with my family. And I'm a mama bear, and that's really not a good idea. I will protect them with my last breath. You know, Al and I talk an awful lot. If AA folded tomorrow, we'd probably be okay. We have a tribe. We have people that we've walked with for over 30 years. My kids might be okay. But I have a 12-year-old grandson and a 9-year-old granddaughter, and their odds aren't great with the alcoholism that runs through their bloodline on both sides. Because my daughter's mother-in-law is 37 years sober. 37, she's 2 more than Al. We're a sober family. These kids never see people drunk. They just don't. That's not how they're growing up. And we all came this close to missing it. This close to missing it. That takes my breath away. If I can never stop, I can never finish repaying AA for everything that is in my life. Everything I do, everything I have. My mother was God, family, country. That's how I was raised. And I'm pretty much the same way. Only it's God, AA, my family, and what I get to do for a living. I get to help people every single solitary day of my life for a living. All of that, every breath I take is because of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I owe that. So when I show up on a Tuesday night and sit in my seat at that Courage to Change group, I'm not there to get anything. If that's my motive for being there, I need to take a good hard look at myself. I'm there to give back. I'm there for the next version of me that walks down the stairs, flipping off the room, scared to death, to tell her it's okay. You're going to be okay. Just have a seat next to me and hang on to the people that are sitting in the room. We can't do it alone, but together we can move mountains. I've seen it happen. Move this one. This was a very thick mountain. And I can't, a grateful heart will never drink. I've never stopped being grateful. I still hear it in Rachel's voice. She's been gone, I think, for 20 years, 15 years, something like that. I still hear in her voice, sounds like you need to write a gratitude list. And I still do that at night. I go through the day of what was great. I do a 10th step at night, but I also go through the gratitude thing, like thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you that I haven't craved a drink in 34 years. There's a woman just like me around the corner somewhere that's dying from alcoholism right now while we're sitting here. She's dying right now, and she will never, ever hear that message of hope and recovery that changed my family. Talk about changing the course of life. And we all have an impact everywhere we go. Gratitude, that word is an understatement. I'm humbled that I get to live the life I live in spite of me. It's almost like I stand there and go, wow. I do play a part in it, but I don't know how I got so lucky. So thank you for listening and being here, and keep coming. Thanks.